Oil may be on the decline, yet it remains a powerful force. The International Energy Agency forecasts that global oil demand might reach its peak as soon as 2028, or sometime in the 2030s. Now, while we may be steering toward a future with less oil, it's clear that we won't entirely abandon it. Why? Because oil has woven itself into the very fabric of our lives. From plastics to pharmaceuticals, fertilizers to the fabric of the clothes we wear, oil's reach is deep, and its impact isn't going away overnight.
However, there's a stark reality that can't be ignored. The world is trying to reduce its dependence on oil. The European Union and Japan are aiming for all new car sales to be electric by 2035. In the meantime, the US and China are channeling hundreds of billions of dollars into renewable energy projects, betting big on solar, wind, and other alternatives. And here's the crux of it. Oil is a finite resource. The looming scarcity and the environmental impacts have pushed countries to search for greener options. If you zoom out a couple of decades, it's easy to see a world where our oil consumption will be significantly lower.
Now, while this may sound like progress to some, it's a serious concern for one person in particular. Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not just a country, it's practically synonymous with oil. The kingdom controls nearly a fifth of the world's proven oil reserves, and unlike Venezuela, which has the largest reserves, Saudi oil is cheap and easy to access. Saudi Arabia boasts not only quantity but quality. The Ghawar field, the largest onshore oil field, stretches over 280 kilometers. The Safaniya field holds the title of the largest offshore field, and the Abqaiq facility is the world's biggest oil processing plant. To put this in perspective, Ghawar alone produces enough oil annually to match Kazakhstan's entire output. And with production costs at just $4 per barrel, compared to around $40 for American shale, Saudi Arabia has one of the lowest costs of extraction in the world. Despite these massive reserves, Saudi Arabia has chosen to limit its production. As a leader in the OPEC cartel, the kingdom has repeatedly cut production to push prices higher. In 2022, this strategy paid off big time. Prices skyrocketed due to a mix of production cuts and geopolitical tensions, particularly the war in Ukraine. The result? Saudi Aramco reported an astounding $161 billion in profits, dwarfing even giants like Apple. But there's a flip side to this oil wealth. Saudi Arabia's economy leans heavily on oil. It makes up 40% of its GDP, 70% of exports, and around 75% of government revenue. Remarkably, Saudi citizens don't pay income taxes instead. The government funds services and salaries through oil revenue. The country's workforce is also unique. Over a third are foreign contract workers, and more than half of Saudi citizens work for the government. This setup makes the economy heavily reliant on oil rent, the profit margin between production costs and the selling price. But what's even more telling is that Saudi Arabia operates as a rentier state, one that relies on selling natural resources rather than diversifying its economy. And despite the global shift away from oil, Saudi Arabia is simultaneously expanding its oil capacity and saving its oil revenue. Why? Because it's making a calculated gamble. Saudi Arabia is stockpiling wealth to fund its massive Vision 2030 initiative, an ambitious plan to diversify the economy. They're essentially betting that they can transform before oil loses its value entirely. One could ask, why hold on to oil wealth if the world is moving away from it? The answer lies in oil's essential role in defense and industry. Fighter jets, tanks, and heavy machinery all depend on oil. So, while the world transitions, there will still be sectors that can't simply switch to renewable sources. Yet, for Saudi Arabia, the stakes are sky high. If the kingdom fails to diversify, it risks economic collapse as the world moves on. MBS's grand vision includes transforming Riyadh into a global financial hub, building futuristic cities like Inneom, and developing tourism hotspots along the Red Sea coast. But these projects require an astronomical amount of funding, much of which is currently derived from oil revenue. So, how exactly does Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman plan to protect Saudi Arabia from an oil bust? His answer is Vision 2030, a plan that is as ambitious as it is groundbreaking. This isn't just about diversifying the economy, it's a complete transformation of Saudi society. Imagine reshaping an entire nation's identity by 2030. Sounds bold, right? Well, Vision 2030 aims to build a thriving non-oil economy, position Saudi Arabia at the forefront of technology, and cultivate some of the most prestigious educational institutions in the world. But can they really pull it off? Let's dive in. At the core of Vision 2030 is sustainability. Saudi Arabia has set a lofty goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, a massive shift considering that today, less than 0.2% of their energy comes from renewables. To reach this target, they're pouring billions into solar, wind, and carbon capture projects. Imagine a country that's been synonymous with oil for decades now investing heavily in green energy. That's the vision MBS is selling. But the green revolution doesn't stop there. Saudi Arabia is investing in desalination plants to secure its water supply and developing sustainable agriculture to boost food security. What's surprising? Some of these initiatives are actually starting to pay off. In the past, Saudi Arabia has been heavily dependent on oil exports. Now it wants to become a regional hub for finance and logistics. Riyadh and Jeddah are emerging as financial tech centers, with cutting-edge developments in artificial intelligence, and yes, literal flying cars. Vision 2030 is also about science and technology. Saudi Arabia is investing in fields like genomics, with the Saudi Genome Project seeking to map genetic information for future healthcare advancements. And it's not just tech. New housing projects are popping up across the nation, with Riyadh positioned to be the new green capital city model that promotes sustainability, green spaces, and eco-friendly infrastructure. The aim? To foster a new Made in Saudi campaign, diversifying local production beyond petrochemicals to everything from biotech to renewable energy components. Of course, one of the most ambitious goals is to turn Saudi Arabia into a global tourist destination. But to draw tourists in the digital age, you need something truly spectacular. Think Jeddah Tower, projected to be the world's tallest building, or Trojena, a ski resort in the desert. Yes, you heard that right, a ski resort. Then there's the Mucab, a massive cube-like structure set to house an entire sustainable city, with shopping, dining, and residential areas all under one roof. It's practically a city within a building. Speaking of entertainment, let's talk about Qiddiya Vast Complex, designed to be a dopamine paradise. From water parks to Formula One tracks, and even an esports stadium, Qiddiya promises endless thrills for everyone. And of course there's the Line, the most talked about project. A futuristic linear city stretching 170 kilometers with no roads, cars, or carbon emissions. Each resident will have all amenities within a 5-minute walk. It's a vision straight out of a sci-fi movie, but Saudi Arabia is betting billions that it can make this a reality. Why all this investment in tourism? Saudi Arabia wants to attract 100 million tourists annually by 2030, with the goal of tourism contributing 10% of the GDP, and creating 1 million jobs for Saudi citizens. The current tourist industry is heavily centered around religious tourism, especially in Mecca. But by 2030, they want to spread the tourism wealth across the nation, from the Red Sea to the futuristic cities and sprawling entertainment complexes. So, can Saudi Arabia pull it off? Vision 2030 is audacious, no doubt, transforming an economy that's relied on oil for decades into a diversified powerhouse within just a few years. It's no small feat, but MBS is betting that, with enough investment, Saudi Arabia can achieve a balanced and sustainable economy, securing its place on the global stage without being shackled to oil. If you found today's video on Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 enlightening, you won't want to miss my deep dive into another major story, how Nigeria's economy was destroyed. In that video, we uncover the shocking realities of how Nigeria, once Africa's largest economy, is facing an unprecedented economic crisis. From the collapse of the naira to massive protests sweeping the nation, I break down how corruption, poor leadership, and misguided policies have led to an economic freefall. So, if you're curious about the factors driving Nigeria's downfall and what lessons other nations can learn from it, make sure to check it out next. Click on the link and see how Nigeria went from boom to bust and what might lie ahead. And please don't forget to subscribe to Salim TV, so you never miss another deep dive into global economic shifts.